The majority of the world's population now is on mobile, and I think if you're not designing mobile first, there's a problem. But making sure that you're looking at what is above the fold, I think, is really important.
Welcome back to another episode of Click to Buy. Today we have a fantastic guest with us, Rebecca Worsley, the brilliant mind behind Rainy City Agency. Rebecca is not just the founder and director of Rainy City, she's actually a pioneering force in the e-com industry. Her agency is a certified Shopify Plus partner, specializing in all things user experience design, development, CRO, and meta. And what sets her and her agency apart? Well, it's the first female-founded Shopify Plus agency in the UK and Europe, and it's been going for about 7 years now and going strong. Her team lives and breathes Shopify, mastering every nuance of the platform. So whether you're a seasoned Shopify pro or just getting started, I know her insights today are sure to inspire and inform you. That's why I thought she'd be the perfect guest to have on to discuss how Shopify brands like yours can optimize their store for more conversions. Rebecca, thank you so much for being my guest here today on Click to Buy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited as well, especially to have another Rebecca. We have a little Rebecca squared moment going on.
Always good. It's a great name.
So I would definitely love, before we dive into the nitty gritty, to actually learn a little bit more about your agency, because I think it's really cool to have you on today. So maybe what inspired you to start the agency? What was your journey here?
Yeah, so I actually started brand side. So I had, it was probably about 10 years ago, kind of got into the early stages of dropshipping when it was quite a relatively new thing. You could get products from AliExpress and China, throw a Facebook ad to it and start seeing results instantly. It's a little bit more tricky nowadays, but that was kind of the early stages. And I started a skincare brand, and to kind of pay for that skincare brand, I started designing people's Shopify websites for $100, $200. And it got to the point where I was making quite a lot of money with doing these websites, and I was like, what do I actually want to do? Do I want to carry on with the brand side? And it was the time where I'd need to start looking into influencers and putting a lot into the social, and that's just not really my jam. It's never really been anything that's kind of got me excited. And so I kind of took the decision on let's go on with the Shopify work. And it was just me and a VA at the time, and I joined Upwork and Store Tasker, and quickly rose to the top of being the top sellers on the platform. And eventually kind of moved my way off there, built the agency up, and now we're a team of 27 people.
Wow.
We work with brands all over the world. We get the job is amazing as well, because it gets to take me to all these places. We do a lot of traveling with it, and yeah, it's been a real journey. And when you kind of look back and think about it, it's oh wow, I've actually done quite a lot.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting that a lot of people I've spoke to or had on the podcast who now have agencies did start on the brand side. I'm really curious if you can think back. Are there any lessons you learned in particular that served you when you were on the brand side that are now still really relevant from the agency side?
Yeah, find a really good agency. I think that's kind of one of the things. I think because I know now what people need and what people look for, because I was that person before. I'd never even heard of Shopify when we first started dropshipping.
Yeah.
And so you need someone that's kind of can act as a partner and kind of advise you and help you grow and scale and look at where you're at in your journey, because you might be the right fit for someone in the early stages, but then you may not be the right fit for someone as they're in that super high growth. So it kind of find an agency for the right part of your journey and where you want to go to, and make sure that you're all kind of aligned on what that journey looks like.
Okay. I think that's really interesting. Actually makes me think, especially since you've been on the brand and the agency side, do you have maybe a question that brands should keep in mind when they're looking for an agency? Because I'm sure from the agency side, kind of when you see a brand, if this is going to be a fit for you, but what do you think brands should think about if they're trying to assess maybe which agency to go with, or if they need an agency?
Yeah, I mean, if they need an agency, I would say it's that's usually early stages, and it's are you spending your time focusing on things that aren't driving the business forward? And if you are, then that's surely something then that you should start thinking about outsourcing to an agency. Typically founders can get caught up in like day to day of things that need to be done. Like, don't get me wrong, but is that where their time's best spent? Are they web designers? Are they CRO strategists? Are they ads managers? And if the answer is no, like what can they be doing that's going to grow and drive while someone else can take that part? And I think it's the same with any business. You should always employ people that are better at you at doing something than what you are, because if you're employing people that, you know, are less skilled than you, then you're always going to be the driving force, and that's not how a business is going to scale effectively.
Exactly. I think that's really good advice, especially because I think a lot of our listeners who are listening in are in that stage where their business, they're trying to grow it. They're trying to figure out like, what's that next step? So now I kind of want to dive into the details a little bit, especially since I know that you and your agency, and also hearing your background, you've done all things web design, CRO, helping things with Shopify. So I'm curious, based on maybe a lot of different clients you've worked with or things that you've seen, have you seen any like really common mistakes that brands are making with like their Shopify store design, maybe across the board, that you think like they should not be making this mistake anymore?
Yeah, I think like specific to like CRO is like treating all of the traffic the same. So like making a change without considering all the different types of customers that you've got coming to the website. And sometimes it is really relevant that a brand needs to do like a full site redesign. And I think like it can be quite unbalanced, like where some agencies like, no, just constantly reiterate. And sometimes you do actually need to go through that process to kind of bring things back to where they need to be and align it. And also like technology changes as well. So some people, you know, we've worked with brands where they've been on like even like a Shopify theme where it's like way back when, where they had a desktop and a mobile version, like a separate section in the actual editor that you had to edit. And I was like, we've got, you know, you've got to bring that technology forward, and you've got to bring the design forward and bring it up to date to where the customer needs to be. And I think if you really understand what that traffic looks like before that point and understand some like key areas where things aren't performing as well, then you can make educated decisions when you are redesigning someone's site. But yeah, understanding like what those different segments look like. And if you don't understand that, that's when you can start to hurt the conversion. And then post launch of a redesign, that's when you can work on like iterative changes where you wouldn't need to necessarily do big pieces of work, but you know, do we need to replace, like reposition where the review stars go on the PDP, or do we need to edit like the floating add to cart on the PDP, or is the slide out cart as optimized as it could be? And that's when you can start making like a little bit more of like the testing. But I think using like all of like your analytics tools, so understanding like GA, having like some heat mapping software on there is so essential. Like Hotjar can be quite expensive for especially startup brands, and you're not going to get enough data out of it on the free plan. So, you know, have a look at something like Lucky Orange is a good tool where it's not that expensive, and it kind of covers every single area of your site. So you can really then start to understand that data and understand who your customer is, because it's so crazy sometimes when I speak to new brands and I'm asking them like, so who is like your target customer? And they're like, you know, maybe like someone that's like 20 to 65, and they do, and it's not as specific as what it needs to be. And I think if you kind of go back to like the early formulations of how you start a brand, like you're always trying to solve a pain point for someone in some way. So understanding and really detailing out who that ideal customer persona is, and it may be completely different to like what the data says, because I've worked with brands as well where, you know, they had all of like their targeting and messaging to like young 20s, and that was like what all their advertising was, and this was like a beauty brand, and in actual fact their main customer was over 55, and that's who was purchasing. So like, how can you make sure that you really are speaking to that person? I think that's kind of one of the main areas, I would say.
I love that. I think that's such good advice. Like, figure out who your customer really is. And I also really resonated with what you said about first, maybe think about that full kind of like store design, making sure that user experience across the board is positive, and then you can make those little tweaks to try to do more of like the CRO of it all. I'm really curious if you have like any specific advice or maybe an example of like a customer that you've worked with to try to narrow down what that customer persona was.
Yeah, like, I mean, we would typically start with like the data and understanding that, but I think like who that customer is needs to come from like the brand side. Like we can kind of advise on how we should be speaking to them and like what that messaging should look like and what that tone of voice is. But that really should be something that they are detailing out and understanding, and it should really be, you know, kind of as much work as you're putting into like your style guide and your brand deck. We should really be putting in as much effort into understanding the customer deck as well, so that when you are working with agencies, that they've got like a really deep understanding as well of who it is that you want to target, because you know most agencies aren't super niche specific as well. So like we'll work with like a ton of different you know, some people may just work with fashion or they may just work with beauty, but more often than not they'll work with like a wide range. And I do think that's a positive thing as well, because we've got so much experience across different niches that something is going to be relevant along the way that we can advise, and we can say, oh, well, this brand actually did this and it worked really well for them, so why don't you think about that? But I do think it should be kind of pulled from like what they're trying to do with the brand first.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's also a really good takeaway, going back to like my earlier question about how do you need to like think about picking an agency. Like it sounds like it's really good advice. If you're going to go for an agency, make sure you already kind of have that information to have maybe the best experience or get the most out of working together.
Yeah, because you want to kind of like, you want to reduce the amount of like learning time as much as possible. And especially if you're going on to like a retainer with someone, you know, you're essentially marrying them for 6 months or so. So you want to kind of kick things off with a bang as best you can. And the more information we have up front, the better that we can just go straight into it without going through like as much of that like learning phase. So yeah, I think, yeah, really like understanding the brand is super important as well for us to make sure that we can give the best advice.
Absolutely. Well, I know that Rainy City Agency and yourself have worked with a lot of brands, and I saw on your site you have like a lot of case studies of a lot of like different changes you've made that have like resulted in more conversions or a better user experience or all these sorts of things. I was wondering if you could like share one of your maybe recent case studies or like use cases of a change that you helped a brand to make that has like really paid off in terms of them reaching whatever goal it is that they had.
Yeah, like one of them, we did like a huge platform migration. So the brand was on Visual Soft, and we kind of moved them across to Shopify Plus, and it was a massive project. Like there was a ton of SKUs, there was a ton of collections, and I'm talking like in the tens of thousands. So it was a big chunky project that needed to be worked on. And we always, whenever we do like a platform migration, obviously we understand like the website, we go through a super in-depth discovery with the client as well, to make sure that we fully grasp the pain points of their current platform, because sometimes it can be like a platform hindrance where they can't make the changes that they need to make, or they can't do it as fast as what they need to do. So like the discovery phase is like a really clear like roadmap on what we need to do, how we need to get there, and what we need to do to kind of fix any of the issues that they've got. And so we always go through like a full website redesign. We optimize all of the pages and look at all the functionality, optimize all of that, and then really kind of like streamline it. And we managed to, with the, once we launched this new site, we had like a 200% increase in like the conversion rate.
Wow.
So a lot of it was around like, they had a lot of like personalization on site as well, which, you know, is more and more kind of popular now to help people have like that point of difference as well. And just really like reduce like the amount of like drop off level that they were experiencing on that PDP, due to having like a piece of functionality that wasn't intuitive for the customer to use, and it wasn't super clear, and it was a little bit buggy, and having all of that optimized. And it wasn't like a particularly sexy product page where we had like all like the bells and whistles, and it was, you know, it wasn't like, because when we've got such a vast amount of products on a site, you can't always go into like super in-depth detail on each of the product pages unless it's like your best sellers. But really like cleaning up that experience and making it a really strong like user flow and user journey, I think is kind of what helps that. Like typically when we design, especially like PDPs, we'll always go for like that long form style. So having like your typical product form and making sure that anything there is super clear and easy to understand. So if you are selling in multiple sizes, that you've got a really clear size guide. And if you've got something around like free delivery, that's highlighted on the PDP. And all of like your tabs and your information should be like easily accessible. Like sometimes the amount of content that people have on a PDP makes it so overwhelming for the users to actually find what they need to. So using like tabs can allow you to cut that down a little bit, and having like your returns information and your shipping information there as well. I think people forget like they spend so much money acquiring new customers that, you know, if that information is not in a really clear and easy to read way, like people could bounce or they could go off looking elsewhere for that info. So yeah, making that really streamlined. And then we always build out below the fold as well, so that we can go into a little bit more detail. We can talk about like the brand a little bit more. We can highlight some UGC, highlight any kind of reviews and things, and, you know, using tools like VideoWise, for example, where we can pull up that user generated content, all kind of helps with that conversion on that page.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for those great examples of how people can kind of optimize or think about what to include in their PDP. Obviously, like you said, like there's different industries maybe need different things, but there are a lot of things what you said, which I think can apply across the board, like making sure that you have that readability, making sure that if there is a lot of information, how can you kind of use like an accordion or a tab or something to make it still accessible? Because I know you are this expert at CRO, if you would be so kind, I would love it if we could actually do a little CRO takedown of one of our audience members' sites together, if that sounds cool.
Definitely, that would be fun. Let me...
All right. Well, we're going to look at BEACN, who, let's pull up their site together. Perfect. So if you are listening in and not seeing the video, BEACN sells a lot of different kind of audio tech, and we're here on their homepage right now. So I'll let you dive in. We've clicked on the BEACN mic product.
So we're going to go on to our PDP because I think this is one of the areas that is most kind of exciting for people to kind of optimize. And this is typically where they'll see like the most bang for the buck, the most impact on, you know, any kind of changes. So this like product form is a little bit different, and we'll do like a bit of desktop and then we'll do a little bit of mobile as well. So on desktop, we've got the content on the left and we've got the PDP on the right. Usually like switching that the other way around can make things a little bit easier for the customer. And I think it's all about thinking about how people are used to shopping as well. And we're used to seeing image on the left, product form on the right. So sometimes little things like that can really help. One thing that we like to do, and I'm just going to switch to mobile view now as well, is we like to move that product title up above the product image. So if we are driving traffic direct from that product store, from like an ad on Facebook or on Instagram, that's the first thing they see. So it's kind of resonating with them. And we also like to bring the reviews up to that point as well. And one thing that people can test out is pulling out one of their 5-star reviews up to the top. So it's the first thing that people see. So, you know, these are hidden unless someone clicks on them, your reviews. So if we pull, you know, the sound quality is amazing, super easy for me to set up myself, highly recommend. Having that as like the first thing that people see is instantly in their head as they're starting to scroll through and understand that product. So having that above the fold on mobile and desktop. You could look at adding like chevrons into the mobile as well so that people know that they can scroll through the product's images. Just tiny little things like that. Sometimes having like little thumbnails as well can help. And showing like more of like what are the payment options. Now, one thing that they could probably test is whether or not having this shop pay or the buy now button is worth having, because if they're selling like multiple products or they've got some product add-ons, what that's going to do is that's going to force people straight to the checkout. And we're really going to miss the opportunity for any cross-selling. So if they do have like, a clip or a wire or something that kind of go, I'm not a musical expert.
Yeah, but so if they have maybe like a product that you might buy a couple things.
Yeah, okay. Or that it can just boost the AOV up higher. And sometimes getting rid of this can help with that. There's quite a lot of like floating information hanging around as well, so it can be quite distracting on mobile. Like we've got the email capture with the discount, we've got like the live chat, and then we've got the floating add to cart as well. So just kind of thinking about, is it too much for the user to read through? Is it getting in the way of any of the clear call to actions that are on the page already? And we just don't want to make it overly busy. And again, this kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier about having that shipping and returns information in a little bit more detail. Obviously, we've got that it does the free shipping here. But if there's got anything that we can add into a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Another thing is that the product images, I don't think are linked to the colour options either. This may just be like a simulator issue. But really, when we click on like the light colorway, we'd want that to be the main image so that people can see, what it is that they're purchasing. And then having any of like their USPs as well would be great to feature on here. So what makes them stand out as a brand, what makes them better than the competitors. And yeah, just looking, I'd just have a look at like the font sizes and things that have been used and the line height as well to make sure that it's all consistent throughout the page. Because we've got different kind of font styles and really we want to develop like a really good hierarchy. I do think it's a good product page though. They've got like a lot of good sections on there. They've got like their UGC, which is great. Maybe they could bring out more UGC that's around just that product only rather than just all of the different, this may be all the product, may just be specific, I'm not too sure. But yeah, maybe they could bring more there and maybe they could bring in some more like video as well. That's kind of showing things in work. And that could be included as part of like their carousel on the product. So yeah, hopefully they are some good tips.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for giving your advice. I think like some of those, like switching around, even just the order of where you see the picture and where you see the product form, like things like that, I think could be like really easy to test for many brands who are building up that product page, trying to figure out how to do it. And like you said, they have a lot of the right ingredients, but it sounds like with different tweaks, you could see if this is going to work for your brand. Like they have the shop pay button, for example. You're saying that maybe if it's a product that you might want to cross-sell with, that's taking up some of the real estate where you could try to do that instead and bring up that AOV. So I think we'll definitely make sure that they get this information and maybe we'll have to do a little update later in the podcast if hopefully they've maybe tried out a couple of these things by the time this episode is live. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think that's a good example as well of a brand where, they've got a really solid brand identity and that's really kind of clear across the site. Like they wouldn't need to go through like a full site redesign, but we don't know I don't know what the conversion rate is now. It could be 12% and I could be eating my words, but they can make them small iterative changes that will really kind of hopefully help boost that number.
Yeah, well, I do know because they also use Instant Page Builder that, for example, on their homepage, they've been working really hard on trying to use different types of UGC or social proof. And their head of marketing did tell me that has helped a bit with their homepage conversion rate. So I think it's really great that now we have some tips for their PDPs because I know that he is really like into building and testing new things and seeing what's working. And I think they really have that mindset over there. So definitely we'll pass this advice their way. And of course, if you're listening in and if you need some studio quality audio equipment, shout out to BEACN for letting us feature them in this little CRO teardown. I think like also touching on something that you did when your teardown was you showed us both the desktop version and the mobile version. And I think that's a really relevant kind of topic in today's day and age for online shopping. So I'd love to know if you just had kind of one piece of advice for brands when they're building pages or sections or what have you for their online store in the mobile version?
I mean, it's always like, yeah, it is designing mobile first. Like the majority of the world's population now is on mobile, and I think if you're not designing mobile first, there's a problem. But making sure that you're looking at what is above the fold, I think, is really important. Like when people are like building like a homepage, for example, like that hero banner, if we got all the information that people need to see is like the header sticky? Does it have like a search functionality? Does it have an account? Is it easy access to the cart? Like all these kind of like key things around making sure that it's as optimized as possible. I think especially like web people, like because we are on laptops and computers all day, let's sometimes forget. Because I mean, personally, I only ever shop now on my laptop, which is crazy. I'm in that 5% of people that love desktop still. So it's just kind of making sure that we are remembering that, you know, we've got to be looking at these key things, because most people don't, unless they have one for work, like people don't often use them for shopping. And I think, making sure that there's a really clear and obvious experience on mobile is important.
Absolutely. Well, that is definitely some advice I think all brands should think about. So build mobile first with that mindset. We're ending near the end of our podcast, but I can't let you leave without getting what I love to call the click-worthy tip. Of course, this is click to buy. So I always like to kind of end the podcast with asking you for one specific piece of advice that you feel could help like a Shopify merchant or brand owner or e-commerce manager, anyone who's kind of an e-commerce enthusiast, let's say, work on improving their conversion funnel or their customer experience shopping journey.
I think it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It's understanding that customer and tracking that behaviour on site. So making sure that we are aware of where the drop-offs are, what they're looking at, what's kind of turning them off a little bit from the site. And I think once we really understand who that customer is, then we can design for that customer and we can solve any of their pain points on site. Because once they're in your funnel, like it's powerful, then we can retarget, we can remarket, like, you know, in the ever-changing rising costs of acquisition, like retention is super important as well. So the more people we can kind of get into the funnel and keep them in that funnel, the more chance we've got of kind of continually selling to them. So don't let people drop off.
Absolutely. Don't let people drop off, and do those little tests. And if you need to redesign your store, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, for example, maybe from Rebecca at Rainy City Agency. Who knows? So of course I know where to find you, but if my audience is listening in and they're like, maybe I would like to hear more from Rebecca, more of her tips, or maybe they're looking for an agency and they're in the UK or somewhere in Europe, where can they find you or Rainy City Agency?
Yeah, so I mean, we're super active on LinkedIn. Like you'll always kind of see me posting on there. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, obviously our website, and we also do a ton of events as well across the UK. So
lovely.
Make sure you kind of subscribe to any of our events, because we're always kind of hopefully giving out as much value that we possibly can.
Sounds great. Well, then you've heard it here. If you're into going to different e-commerce events or getting some more of that advice, maybe getting tips that can help you with your brand, definitely check out all of their stuff on socials and on their site. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for being my guest here today on Click to Buy. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And so for everyone listening in, if you're still listening, thank you very much. I wouldn't be a good marketer if I didn't say, please like, subscribe, leave a review for this episode of Click to Buy so we can bring on more great guests like Rebecca. Today, we talked about everything from how to know what to look for when you're picking your Shopify agency for a brand side, ideas on how you can optimize your own Shopify store, your PDP, and more. So I'm so grateful to have all of Rebecca's great advice today. So be sure to listen through the episode or check our website. We'll have a little blog recap as well with all the highlights. Once again, I've been your host, Rebecca Anderson. And until next time, keep turning those clicks into buys.